Welcome to Empire Building. I'm Wendy Papazan, and together with my 4 co-hosts, we bring you weekly unfiltered conversations about leadership, growing a big empire, and living on your own terms.
I'm Kimber Levitt-McKeedy. We are investors and wealth builders with over $75 million in combined net worth.
I'm Sarah Reynolds. We are visionaries who built more than 50 businesses with over $122 million in annual revenue.
I'm Tiffany Fikes. We've led thousands of people and do it all while being pretty good moms.
And I'm Seychelle Van Poole. We are your podcast to learn how to build big businesses and even bigger lives.
Hey, Empire Builders, it's Kimber Levitt-McKeedy, and I am here with Tiffany this week. And we are jumping into a topic that I know I've been struggling with a little bit, so I feel like it's always a topic that's fun to unpack, and maybe for some of you too. So, Tiffany, do you know what the second Friday in January is known for?
I do not. Tell me.
I didn't either, and I recently learned that the second Friday in January is actually Quitter's Day. So, Quitter's Day, right? The date that people most likely have abandoned their resolution, right? Like they had a goal, they started the year feeling really optimistic about this goal, and by the second Friday, most of them have abandoned it.
That's so fast.
So fast. So fast. So fast. And I can definitely say I have lived a year where that has happened, right? Like where I was like, I'm going to do this. And
oh, for sure.
Yeah. Yes. So I thought about like, what are the why does that usually happen? Like, why does this amazing plan not actually, right, less than 2 weeks in, people have already abandoned it? Like, I feel like part of that's because they had the goal, but they didn't have any of the steps, right? They didn't have any of the executable strategies to actually live it out.
Yeah. And that's what we are going to help solve for you. We don't want the second Friday of January to be your Quitter's Day. And so we are going to talk about how to make sure you can move from vision to actually executing.
That's right.
And execution is simply turning strategies into results. And I love that I'm like, yeah, it's simply doing that. Like, that's a very key word. It is simple, but it is definitely not easy at all.
Yes. And I think when you think about that, Tiffany, like we talk about, okay, so the New Year's resolution to the 2 weeks in, that's yourself personally. Most of us spent a huge chunk of the fourth quarter, no matter what year you're right, you spent the fourth quarter thinking about your goals, revisiting like your vision, what are you doing, how are you going to get there? Like it's a massive number, right? Companies are spending north of $30 billion a year annually to set these like strategies and goals. And more than 80% of companies, right, maybe not by the second week of January, but 80% of companies are not successful in the goal that they set out to do. And so if we know personally, right, it's the steps, it's actually the same thing for our businesses. So as empire builders, like that's our same challenge is that we spent a lot of time thinking about the vision. We spent a lot of time thinking about the goal, and yet we actually didn't identify the simple, not easy, right, those steps to be able to do it. So we're excited to kind of unpack like 5 steps for really using the 4 disciplines of execution, which is an amazing strategy, a great book, Franklin Covey, like just gives some good tactical resources. And then we have a bonus for you that we think from the empire builder perspective and our powerhouse leaders that all of you are, is actually an extra step to ensure that execution happens in your world.
You're always going to get a little bit extra. Whatever the thing is that we're going to do, there's probably an extra step that we're going to add in or an extra perspective on it.
A little flavor. I'm going to give you a little bit of flavor.
That's right. I'm excited to jump in and cover the 4 disciplines of execution and then the bonus empire builder step at the end. So do you want to start us off, Kimber?
Yeah, let's jump in. So the first one maybe is obvious, right? Like the first step is focus. This clarity is power. And I think while again, like simple, not easy, that the focus, sometimes I know in our organization, there was one year, a few years ago, where we had these key, like our top line goals, and there were 25 of them. Like, guess what? Like, I don't even think we had a single one. There were so many. We had all of these goals. You know, we have a complex, we've got multiple businesses across different industries, across a geography. But because there were so many, it was like there was no focused effort. So the first step is to really identify that one wildly important goal. So you have to actually be disciplined enough to really identify what that could be. I think when you actually can tie that goal to impact, like not just the big number. So for those of us that are in the real estate sales business, a lot of times that's transaction count, right? Like I'm going to sell 100 houses. And so that might actually be your wildly important goal. I think being able to shift that to something that connects to the why is really important. So we've heard, I know a lot of our teams, right, have shifted that to not just transactions, but actually the wildly important goal is saying we want to serve 100 families, because that's more reflective of the values that we want to have. We want to actually be servant leaders. We want to serve the people around us in our community. And so having that one top line focus really becomes really impactful. In my brokerage businesses, right, where we talk about the careers impacted, that we want to help, 300 entrepreneurs reach their career goal. We want to add them into our business. So just some simple things that can allow your wildly important goal to be really connected, actionable, and reflect the impact that you want to have on the world.
Well, and I also think for me, like I know a goal of profit, a certain number of profit or something like that. I know myself, and I know that I'm going to get really goal-oriented around those things, and I'm going to treat people differently according to how helpful they are to my bottom line. And so when I first started out, I had to talk about family serve because I didn't want to talk about GCI or, a lot of what our industry talks about, because I knew that I would treat a $150,000 house different than $1 million house if that was tied to my goal. And so knowing your values as well and, who you are as a person, it's not just the impact that you're having, it's literally the impact you're having. Because if you're going to treat people differently, if they're going to get you to your goals, you're going to be having negative impact where you want to be having positive impact. And so making sure that you're clarifying and focusing your goal in a way that is motivating to you personally to show up in the business the way that you really want to show up as a leader, as a salesperson, as whatever your role is in the business.
That's right. And not just you, right, Tiffany? Like, I think it starts with us, of course, but also your teams, right? Because it then translates all the way down to the person who opens the door in the office to greet somebody in. And that role is also critically important to family served, right? That each one gets treated the same, that they really see how, hey, this interaction that I have at a frontline level is actually connected to the bigger goal. So it helps people. A lot of times you have people in your organization who are very mission aligned with you, but being clear that how does this impact show up throughout a year of the organization? So that first thing is focus. Clarify through one wildly important goal.
Okay, so once you have focus, then the next step, number 2, is to identify. And you're going to identify the lead measures that must be acted upon. And this can be the hardest part, I think, because you're saying, all right, I focused to one goal, but now I've got to focus. If all the leading indicators that I could focus on, what's going to be the one thing that's going to move the needle? And that can feel scary. I mean, it feels scary to me. Do you ever feel that way, or is it just me?
Oh, 100%. Well, because you actually have to bet on something. And I think sometimes the ability for us to have a lot of different things that we're doing actually hedges a little bit, right? And so the leading indicator, it's also the thing that you can most clearly throughout your organization, right, influence. So sometimes these big goals, it's actually the thing that that's not gray. It's you either did it or you didn't do it. You either had the conversations or you didn't have the conversations. You either added the new leads into your database or you didn't. It's very black and white. And that is also, I think, what happens when we're not hitting our goal. A lot of times we hide, right? We stop talking about it. We don't revisit it. And this is one that once you get clear, you have to bet that you're directionally correct, that step is going to help you get closest to your goal. And then it actually creates a lot of exposure because there's nowhere to hide from whether or not you did or didn't do it.
Yeah. I think about that going all in our real estate sales business. One of the biggest things we did last year was focusing on where were the leads coming from? Where were we actually getting business? Because we started to struggle at the end of 23. Okay, 24, we are going all in on only the top 3 things, which I know is a little different. It's not one, but 80% of our business was coming from 3 sources. And so we abandoned all other sources, which felt so scary, to your point, because it was what if I got it wrong? What if this year everything's coming from the radio or, whatever that thing is that had been generating a little bit of business. And now we literally said we will do nothing but those things. Like, we have 3 things we spend money on, and that is it. And it's terrifying. But it's helping grow the business. It's getting us closer to our goal. And even still, every month, I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe we're not doing X, Y, and Z anymore. And what if that's where that one buyer is or that one seller is this month? So I just want to validate that for you as a leader. Like, when you go all in on identifying the lead measure that you are going to track and say, this is how we're going to get our goal, it feels scary. And I would say it never stops feeling scary until you're at the goal.
100%. 100%. Because when I was going through this with our team recently, I was like, okay, I need to look back and I need to like think in the goal setting process. We've been going through this process for almost 20 years, right? Unfortunately, I can only pull out like 2 or 3 years where we just crushed it. And you'd think I would have learned by now, right? That like the years we actually crushed it were the years that we didn't focus on the big goal. We didn't actually focus on the wildly important one. We named it, we knew what it was, but we actually focused on those 2 or 3 leading indicators that we were going to be committed to doing. And that's what we focused on. And the challenge that you're saying, Tiffany, it's scary. It's also like it exposes all the things, because the answer is that what we know, we conceptually know that 20% of our activities drive 80% of our results, but we often live in the 80%. Like, you're living in the messy, you're living in the reaction, we're living in the thing. And what often suffers is the 20%. Like, you're actually going to live in the space that is actually makes you maybe feel busier, but is actually not going to get you to your goal. And so this actually forces you to name the 20%. And then get really clear about what you're doing, like what the team at each individual level is doing to nail that piece. And not in 50 steps, but in 1 to 3 actionable lead indicators that are going to get you there.
Yeah.
All right. So now that you've focused and you've identified the lead measures, and I know like we make that sound easy. And maybe it's helpful, Tiffany, before we come off of that one, to just give a couple examples. So like, for example, in a sales business, you might have your top line, right? Family served. Then your leading indicators. Sometimes we think it's about contracts. I would even think it's further up the funnel. It's like, how many conversations did you have? Right? Literally, how many conversations? If it takes 100 conversations to get to 1 contract, you have a goal of selling 24, you probably need to have about 14 conversations every day. That's your leading indicator. So literally, all you're going to measure at the end of the day was, did I have 14 conversations? Like that's one of the measures. That's simple, right? Because it's literally like you either did or you didn't. And then you're going to go down, right? Your next one's like, okay, so did 14 conversations, did that lead to 1? That person that sat down and met with me and talked about real estate. But being able to be that clear that that's what we're going to track and measure in a sales business example.
Yeah. One of the other things that we got clear on last year as we were planning for 2024, so at the end of 23, planning for 2024, we looked through all of our conversion rates because we fell short of our goal in 23. So we looked back and we said, where did we get off? Because we were doing the activities correctly. How did we not end up where we needed to be, having focused on one thing? And we discovered, our set to held conversion was the pits. It was like 50%. So we were having the conversations, we were setting the appointments, but they weren't showing up. And so we went all in on that one thing for a quarter and said, we are going to focus on that metric. That was the metric we talked about at every team meeting. Anytime it changed, we put it in Slack in a channel so that people could see it going up or down and like became aware of it. Everybody on the team said, how does my job affect that one number? And we ended 2024, I believe, at 82% set to held, which means next year's goals, we don't have to set as many appointments. We don't have to have as many conversations because they got better at that skill. Or you can set the same amount of appointments and you can serve more families at the end of the year. It's a win-win either way you look at it.
Absolutely. And you're going to that next thing, right? So when you've got your focus and you've identified those critical lead measures, right? The third step is really to track it, right? What's the scoreboard? What is the actual scoreboard that's going to allow you to focus on tracking of those steps? So essentially what you're doing is like, you're saying, okay, so I named the goal. I identified like the leading indicators, those steps, and then you're actually going to forget about the goal and focus on just the steps. Like you're literally going to just now focus, like Tiffany was saying, on those steps. And you're going to have a visual way, whether that's on Slack or that's in your team meeting, to actually create very clear transparency. Like in the beginning, some of us today have really intricate trackers that maybe track 10 numbers, but we started with 1 or 2 or 3 numbers that we were tracking. So again, focus on that piece. Because Tiffany was saying, hey, we actually realized we were actually doing the thing we said. We were having the contacts, but the people weren't coming in. First, you want to build the muscle to get to the contacts, right? So that is where you'd start at the top. What's the number one thing that we need to do to actually like fill the funnel? Making the contacts. We actually backed up for us in the marketing person, which was leads, like new contacts added into the database. Because we knew, hey, if we can get them in the database, that was sort of the initiation of the funnel. So we need to have 100 new people that like were not in our database before. We had to grow it by 100 people a week, right? That was somebody's big leading indicator. And then what were the contacts that as an agent, right, I was going to be having every single day. And that scoreboard just becomes really clear. Hey, you said you were going to do 14 and you only did 10. Awesome. That's what the scoreboard says. And it's very clear and very visible. Because what we find is a lot of us, part of why we don't get to the goal is because we literally set it and we don't revisit it until the fourth quarter of the next year. Like maybe you revisit the goal, but you don't revisit any of the steps that you said you don't actually have a defendable scoreboard. So having the steps that you're really focusing in on in a very visual way that is clear, minimum weekly, that you're revisiting the tactical. Did I do it? Not do it. No narrative. It either was like, it's green, it's yellow, it's red.
Yeah. And that's powerful. The like no narrative. I just want to repeat that for everybody to hear. You either did it or you didn't do it. There's no, yeah, but fill in the blank. Like that level of tracking creates what we're going to talk about next. The number 4 is you need to have a clear cadence of accountability. Like the reality is, did you do it or did you not do it? And how do you feel about that? Like people think of accountability as someone coming down on you, but self-accountable people don't need anything but a mirror. And the mirror is your tracker. And so when you see I did it or when you force yourself to acknowledge I did it or I didn't do it, self-accountable people treat the next day differently. And so, you definitely want to get into, at a minimum, a weekly process that you're highlighting the wins or the opportunities that allow you to course correct. Because if you wait till the fourth quarter, it's too late. There's not really going to be any course correction. But you want to have like a consistent practice that reviews and gains insights from the steps that you've been executing on.
And Tiffany, your example was exactly that. Right? Like you were like, we are doing the thing, but the result's not showing up. That insight allowed you guys to get super focused on that set to held number, which was actually like the crux of like the skill that would need to be necessary to then get to the outcome. But if you weren't actually using the cadence of accountability, tracking the numbers, looking at the scoreboard, you wouldn't have had that ability to even go in and target what was the thing that I really needed to get my team focused on. And as a leader, it also helps you focus sometimes on the training. Like in the cadence of accountability is going to help you say, okay, like this is what I'm actually really need to double click on so that the team is leveling up that skill.
I love that. Let's talk about like some different ways that we've done accountability. And accountability to me, like I said, I don't need someone else to hold me accountable. I just have to say I didn't do it, and then I'm going to go figure out how I do it the next time. So, like the way we started accountability on our team was some group accountability every morning. Everybody's phone would ring at the same time. This was like before daily huddles were a thing or stand-up meetings seemed to be what everybody was doing. Everybody's phone rang at 8:45 and everybody got on the call and they would say, this is what I said I would do yesterday. This is what I did. So like I said I was going to talk to 20 people. I talked to 25. Or I said I was going to talk to 20 people. I talked to 12 people. And this is my goal for today. So this is what I did yesterday, and this is what I'm going to do today. There was no shaming, no nothing. It was just, we're going to say out loud what we said we were going to do and the reality of what we did. Because I know Tiffany acts differently if she knows she's going to have to state in front of someone whether she did what she said she was going to do or not.
100%.
That was kind of how we started accountability on our team around those, what is that one metric that we're going to track?
Yes. We still, like my phone still rings at 8:30, right? Like we still use that. We still have that huddle. And it is that simple. Like what's the focus for today? And how did I do my focus for the day before? And then that translates into that big like weekly meeting where we're actually physically all together and we're reviewing the numbers. That I think is where sometimes the narrative comes in and the excuse. So when I'm coaching leaders and they're like, oh my goodness, I don't know what to do. My team seems off. Like I can't, like the culture of productivity, like what are you actually trying to build? And that's actually very much framed by what type of meeting, like, right, what type of cadence of accountability do we have in that meeting? Are you having conversations? I think even setting at the beginning of a quarter, what is it going to look like when we're off from the goal? So what steps are we going to take? Because the second your team gets really comfortable that it's okay to miss the goal, that the goal is not that important, or Tiffany, to your point, like we might be behind on the goal, but what we're going to really focus in on is placing a bet that like this item, moving this conversion number, and we're all going to focus on it. So I find that when teams in that cadence of accountability have a really well-defined action that they're going to do. We used to call this the 15th protocol. I heard it recently, actually called the 5 p.m. protocol. Like on the day, if you're behind, on the week, if you're behind, like what are you going to do? Are you guys going to do an extra session together where everybody has to come in? Are you going to, like, what is the thing that we're all committing to doubling down on something to ensure that, again, not the goal, right? Because we can't influence likely your goal. There's nothing that you can do today that's going to move that number. So you're trying to focus on what are the actions, and then how do I actually get into a practice where as a team or as a group or myself with my coach, like I'm saying, okay, that means, gosh, if I'm a solo person, I'm an entrepreneur of me, I lead me, right? That I'm off. So I've got to do this extra thing because the impact that I'm committed to at the top line goal is, I'm not just interested, right? I'm committed to that outcome.
So if you've never heard of 15th protocol, I love 15th protocol. The concept of a 5 p.m. protocol, that's hardcore and awesome.
No. And I heard it, I was like, interesting. I like it.
I know, like that's somebody who's not willing to get behind on their goal. That's what I hear when I hear a 5 p.m. protocol. So what it basically means is if I am off that leading measure by the 15th of the month, if I am not halfway to my goal in the leading measure or the lagging, whatever you decide, this is the thing that's going to happen. So like our team always had a bold 100, like a day of we're going to have 100 real estate conversations. It was on their calendar for the Thursday after the 15th. It was already on their calendar. They were planning to do it. And if we got to the 15th and they were not halfway to their goal, they executed the bold 100 day. If they got to the 15th and they were at or ahead of goal, they just deleted it off their calendar. So like it was already there, the spot was held, and they would execute it if they were behind together as a team.
I think those are the key components, right? Because it's like not just having a cadence to look at it, but I think what you're saying, Tiffany, I love that. So again, like whatever that looks like for your team, I think it is keeping it like as a group is really important, that the team does it together, because this is a team goal and we're each focusing on the activities that we can do to drive that forward. And I love that it's there and you get the win of getting back those couple hours if you're ahead of goal.
Yeah. And we failed forward on that because it was like, oh, if it's the 15th, then we've got to add something into the calendar, but somebody's already booked something. And so learning that it's there and it becomes a delete off the calendar. And that's a dopamine hit of like, oh, I don't have to do that. Oh, it's so good. Like you win when you get to delete that off your calendar.
Yes. And I think the reality is this is hard. When I say in almost nearly 20 years, and I can recite these things for you, leading and lagging. It's the discipline of consistency. It is the discipline of consistency where it all falls down. So I feel like we're walking everybody through it more perhaps for ourselves. Because if you're getting into the first quarter and you're like, we're already behind, make sure you were clear. Did you have a clear goal, right? Did you have the leading indicators? And maybe if you start with 5, take this moment and go back and just get focused on one of them, right? Take a goal that you're like, okay, you know what? Let's just we believe this thing here, we're going to just all focus together on this leading indicator for the next 30 days to really see if we can move the needle, which means as a leader, you've got to really identify what that is. Having a scoreboard that tracks it really visibly, and then ultimately creating that cadence of accountability. So that kind of walks us through the framework around the 4 disciplines of execution, how you could dig into that. And of course, right, Tiffany, we had a chance to say, based on our experience, right, in the world, what do we think number 5 would be? What are the things that we could really do from our Empire Builders and the Her Best Life sort of community? And the thing that I've seen actually be really powerful in this 5th step is actually kind of counterintuitive. It's actually booking time in your schedule in advance for your recovery, whether you're on or off your goal. And part of what I mean by that is literally taking time away from the business. Sometimes we think from an intensity standpoint, if we're off, we just need to double down and do more and do more and do more. And it's actually the do more that might be the thing that's blocking you from that success. That pulling away gives you the space to recover. It gives you the space to actually be creative, and might actually be to unlock, right, the 20% that your business actually needs and that you actually need to achieve the goal. So that 5th step is in advance right now. Find on your calendar time, like, to just do nothing, to like sit, to recover, to take a walk, to build in the thing that is actually going to unlock you to come back in and show up as the leader that can help execute on all these amazing things.
Yeah, I think often we approach that as something to be earned, like that this is a bonus that when we have done X, Y, and Z for others or for our business or for whatever, then we will get to take a walk or have that downtime. And the reality is, just like you said, Kimber, like that is the goal that creates your ability to show up the best that you can. And so this is not a reward. A day off is not a reward. It is mandatory. Time for yourself, mandatory, not to be earned. You, in your just existing, have earned the right to recover. I mean, our body systems are set up in a way that is the cycle of our humanness. And so not acknowledging that makes you show up less than you could at each step of this execution. So, like, one of the things on our team to win the week, winning the week, you get a money grab. It's like super fun. If you set a listing appointment, if you signed a buyer and got something under contract, if you've done all those things in the same week, you win the week. But the 4th thing is you had to have taken a full day off. You had to have executed those 3 things and take a day off. And then that's really winning your week. So make sure you're putting that cadence in for your people as well as yourself.
Absolutely. Well, we're the model for that, right? So if we are watching our team struggle to hit a goal, and we think sometimes that it's intensity, get more intense. And it's actually building in a consistent practice that's allowing people to recover. Because even if they're succeeding in hitting the goal, and I love that that's your 4th thing, Tiffany, that if they're doing that, that's why burnout is so high for entrepreneurs, right? It's why we look at people who seemingly are having all this success and they just opt out. It's because they actually were running the intensity of going so hard, so fast, and chasing success was actually leaving them empty in all the other areas. So the thing that you might need to unlock and to really win the execution game could actually be the pause and pulling back and taking a minute and booking that in your calendar so that you can come back refreshed and ready to really ensure that success.
I love that. Okay, so let's recap our 5 steps to not quitting on Quitter's Day and getting to the end of the year and crushing the goal. So, number 1, you are focused on one wildly high impact goal, whatever that means for you. What is the one high impact goal that you are going to be setting up everything else around? Number 2, you're identifying the steps or the lead measures to achieve that goal. And you are going all in on less things. You're making a bet on how you're going to get there. 3, you focused on the steps, not the goal, through a compelling scorecard. So you know the steps and you're tracking them and watching them. Number 4, you've got a clear and consistent cadence of accountability. And number 5, you are scheduling weekly time away to recover and rest to make sure that you're showing up the next day and the next time block your best. If you master those 5 steps, you will find at the end of the year that one wildly high impact goal is achieved.
I love it. So we're excited. All right, our Empire Builders, go out and win the execution game as you create a big business and an even bigger life. Have an awesome week.
Bye, guys.
This podcast is for general informational purposes only. The views, thoughts, and opinions of the guest represent those of the guest and not KWRI and its affiliates, and should not be construed as financial, economic, legal, tax, or other advice. This podcast is provided without any warranty or guarantee of its accuracy, completeness, timeliness, or results from using the information. Warning. You must comply with the TCPA and any other federal, state, or local laws, including for B2B calls and texts. Never call or text a number on any do not call list, and do not use an auto dialer or artificial voice or pre-recorded messages without proper consent. Contact your attorney to ensure your compliance.